Let's do a little
4,
exercise.
1,
Element 115, essentially non-existent.
3, 4.
And he told police he was able to time travel because aliens filled his body with, you guessed it, alcohol.
Not the beast!
See?
Boys!
Yo, you guys, I got nothing.
Oh wow! I thought that was
Wow.
I thought that was actually going somewhere.
Yeah, way to kill the recurring like joke, Mike, of you starting off every podcast episode with a joke or a story, huh?
Or
or
solid cold open today.
Oh, maybe I'm on like a Shandling level where that is the joke.
Oh, it could be. Are we
Wow.
getting that meta already?
Did we ever not be that meta?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like you got to draw the line somewhere because you start getting meta to the point where it's like obnoxious.
Of course. Yeah, it doesn't.
But
take
what if you
much, I don't
start
think.
obnoxious and get meta?
Oh, that's just sparking up the wrong tree. I just don't like it, you know? I mean, I like self-referential humor, but when you start, like, actively calling attention to being like, oh, look how quirky and weird I am because I'm quirky and weird. I hate that shit so much. Like, just
Oh,
be
wow.
quirky.
Anyways.
Just be quirky and weird. Like, it's fun enough just being quirky and weird. You don't have to, like, be like, look at me, look how quirky and weird I am.
You see what happens, Mike? See
Who
what
are you
happens when
talking to right now?
Yeah, are you mad at
don't
us,
know.
Mitch?
I don't know. I'm
Got the show off
ornery.
the rails before it even started.
Yeah, you know.
I
sometimes-
You're what,
Jesus
Mitch?
Christ.
What? I'm ornery.
What did you
I was.
What
listen,
was that?
Listen, this morning I was aroused from my sleep, and not in a good way.
Oh,
by Christmas
ornery
music.
and aroused. Oh,
by
oh,
Christmas music on the radio.
why?
I have no idea. It's August. Why is there?
What song was
Because
it?
it's the only thing people
I'm
look
dreaming
forward
of a
to right
white
now.
Christmas.
Ugh.
Yeah,
It was
of
like your
all its-
alarm or something.
Yeah.
Are you sure you weren't just like listening to Rush Limbaugh?
Well, no, it wasn't even my alarm. It was somebody else's alarm that woke me up too. So it's like I woke up earlier than I wanted to music that I wasn't expecting, that's not suited for this time of year. And out of all the Christmas songs, it had to be that one. They couldn't play like Jingle Bells or something fun. Instead, I gotta listen to Frank Sinatra, whoever sang that song, like slowly crooning it out, like taking 10,000 years to say the next line.
Wow, Mitch, you really did wake up in a
Yeah.
mood, huh?
Yeah,
This is
dude,
a
tell us how you feel, dude.
This is a hot open.
Listen, you gotta interject some drama into these things every once in a while,
Jesus
you know?
Christ.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what?
guys,
Next time I'll write something down so that doesn't happen again.
Guys, I'm really excited to talk about the Illuminati today, right? That's what we're talking about,
Yeah.
triangles
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
I think so.
That's the topic of the show.
Yeah, triangles and
Freemasons.
pyramids and, you know.
DDP.
Yeah, yeah.
The all-seeing eye. What was DDP's symbol? The diamond upside down, right?
Wasn't it this?
Yeah, but it was
Yeah.
upside down, wasn't it? Didn't he flip
I
it upside
thought
down?
he did it upside down, too. Yeah,
I
like
don't
that.
remember.
Yeah.
If you stick your tongue in it, it's a WAP. Goes from DD.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Oh, what? You didn't think the boomer had current references?
What ass P word?
Surprise,
Yeah.
motherfuckers.
You know how to look at like trending topics on Twitter? Is that what you were getting at, basically?
My grandson
Congrats.
taught me.
Yeah, that's good. Good for you.
So yeah, we today we're talking about triangles, but not the Illuminati. We're talking about the mysterious ones, right, fellas?
The paranormal
Yeah,
ones.
sort of the
Paranormal.
ones that encompass a certain area of the globe and what sort of weird occurrences happen in correlation to those triangular areas. It's weird that they're all triangles. You know?
Location
There's no fucking
triangles.
parallelograms or squares.
A rhombus.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, the Bermuda rhombus. Yeah, the Bermuda rhombus. They've been talking about it since the 1700s. It's just crazy.
I'm partial
Well,
to a dodecahedron myself.
I have
There you
that
go,
question because I wasn't able to find anything. Like, who... I know that there's one dude coined the Bermuda Triangle, which I think that was like the first formal triangle.
Yeah.
But like, how do they define what becomes a point of the triangle? Is that arbitrary? Did you guys find anything? Because I didn't find anything.
So with
that
the
said,
one
like,
I looked
the word
into,
might-
with the one I looked into, it appeared to be pretty arbitrary.
Yeah.
But
same.
I don't know about the other
Convenience.
ones. Yeah.
And, and because the term triangulate is so popular, it's
Okay.
just, use 3 points to sort of get an area together. Because once honestly, 4 points? Come on. Dude.
That's
you
too much.
Can't, you gotta be shitting me. 5 points? You're gonna come around here and you're gonna say you want the Bermuda Pentagon? No. The Pentagon is reserved for one thing, and that is the U.S. government. Okay, and I stand up proud, and I will not kneel when I look at a flag. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. I will kneel. I'll kneel on both knees. I don't care. I don't care. I'll do whatever you want.
I'll kneel because I'm sick of standing, to be honest.
Yeah, fuck that.
I don't want to stand on my feet all day.
It's a little weird though that this conversation seems to keep coming back full triangle to the Illuminati.
Yeah, that is.
Well, they're
full
listening
triangle.
right now. You know that, right?
Pentagon, pentagram,
This
NSA.
episode is never going to air because of the Illuminati. They're going to
It
stop
just
it.
comes out all
already,
garbled.
They're already deleting our recordings right now. as we
Exactly.
speak. Like, nothing's
Preemptive.
saving
What
today.
a waste of their time.
Yeah.
Right?
An absolute waste of their time.
Let's bother
A
these
waste
poor
of our
assholes.
tax dollars.
Yeah, absolutely.
The best guess I had for points like in the triangle was shipping routes.
Okay.
Like that was the only thing I could come up with. Like this, because we'll be talking missing boats, we'll be talking missing planes, and that's the only thing I could think of. Is like most of these things went missing from one destination on the way to another.
Yes.
So my best guess, although I couldn't find anything really to back this up, was that they're determined by this ship was leaving this location to go to this location, went missing. And then this location, if they're going to this location, it gets missing. And then that's the only way I could think of that there might be a reason to pick these locations for points of a mysterious triangle.
Yeah.
I feel like that makes sense.
So do we know which was the first? I know we all kind of dedicated ourselves to one individual triangle.
Right.
And the Bermuda Triangle, since I picked that one, the first unusual disappearance of that was September 17th, 1950. So that was kind of like the first time it was ever kind of recognized.
That's interesting.
Which I thought it would have been a lot sooner, but it kind of makes sense. I would have thought more like World War II-ish, maybe a little bit before that. But
I would have
yeah,
thought that there'd be stuff like going back way further.
Yeah, I have a couple from. Hold on, let me see. The first weird shit. I did the Michigan Triangle, and the first weird disappearance that I have within that is related back to 1679.
Oh,
holy
wow.
crap! Wow.
Yeah. So again, this goes to like what makes something a triangle. Like in my attempts to answer that question myself, I came up with the dude Vincent Gaddis, Gaddis, who is an American author who invented the phrase Bermuda Triangle.
Okay, yeah.
And that was between I think it's 64. It says that he came up with that. So obviously all the weird shit had taken place up to that point for the most part. It was just this dude's investigation into it where he said, and again, I don't know if I didn't look into it any further than that, so maybe there's somewhere where he's on record saying this is why I called it that. But it's like going back and saying, well, this weird shit seems to happen between these points. And then saying like, oh, well, even further back now, we had this weird thing happen in this area. And then, oh, does it fit within this perimeter? Okay, now that the perimeter is mysterious, where the things that made it mysterious have been happening all along, as far as we know. It's just one, like a person going and saying like, oh, hey, this area seems to contain more weird shit than the outside area.
Yeah, I agree. That is the same. That is the case with my area, my triangle, the Bridgewater Triangle. It was a term that was coined in like the 1970s, but there's stuff that goes back to like as early as the 1400s in terms of like certain landmarks that, we'll talk about in a little bit. Because we are talking about triangles, and we all picked one of them.
Yeah.
Jarvis, you said you did the Bermuda Triangle. Mike, the Michigan Triangle. I mentioned the Bridgewater Triangle. Mitch, what was your triangle?
My triangle is the Dragon's Triangle, and I gotta one-up you all because stories about the Dragon's Triangle in the Devil's Sea, where it's located, go all the way back to like 1000 BC in China.
Hell
So-
yeah.
Damn.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my triangle.
So all over the map with these triangles. But, they weren't necessarily calling them these specific names all the time, but that doesn't mean that crazy or unusual things were happening in those areas, right?
Yeah, because it's the weird shit that happens, and then it's us as humans trying to put tags on it, trying to put labels on it, trying to break it down in a way that makes more sense. Because for the most
Categorize
part,
it somehow.
a lot of the phenomena makes no sense. And even like though it goes back this far, Mitch is saying like pre-recorded history for our continent.
Yeah.
The weird shit took place. We still don't know why, and we have planes. We have laser surgery. We still don't know.
Sure.
Cool. So where do we want to start? Who wants to start?
I don't know. I'm tempted to say start with the Bermuda Triangle because that's the one that
Most
I think
familiar.
like everybody at least knows a little bit about, right?
Yeah.
Because like for instance, when it comes to like the Dragon's Triangle, I honestly had never even heard of the Dragon's Triangle until we decided to do this episode and I started doing
Same
research into like mysterious triangles and stuff like that.
Same here. I had no
So
idea.
I feel like the Bermuda Triangle is probably like the best jumping off point to get into this topic.
Okay.
In my
So
opinion.
Let's do it. So everyone knows the Bermuda Triangle. It's a stretch. It's a triangle of 3 points. If you didn't know what a triangle was, it goes from the northern part. It goes from Bermuda, which is the most northern tip, all the way down to Miami on the west side, and then the east side stretches over to Puerto Rico. And let me just get my numbers straight here. It is 1.5 million square miles of ocean.
Wow.
And like I said before, September 17, 1950 was kind of when the first suggestion of an unusual disappearance. And that disappearance was it was a training mission with some soldiers on it. They were flying from one base to another. Forget what the base. I think they were going to Cuba. Cuban base. But anyways, they ended up going missing, and no one was ever able to find any wreckage or any radio, like black box, nothing. They couldn't find anything from these guys. They just disappeared off the face of the earth. And that has been happening since the 1950s. I mean, there's been several ships and boats all happening, all because of that. And the more I kind of dug into it, the more I was finding a lot of the time, it seems like it's hard to pinpoint exactly what could have caused these problems, but for me, logically, it's like, if you look at the Bermuda Triangle, it's in the middle of, like, where hurricanes kind of sweep through the Atlantic Ocean up into the U.S., and to me, logically, it would make sense that it could have been a crazy storm, could have been a hurricane in the I'm not entirely sure when hurricane research really became a thing. I'm assuming it had to have been 50s, 60s as radar tech, was kind of getting better, all that stuff. We were able to track storms better. But a lot of the more digging I did, I started to find out that it was a lot more magnetic anomalies. So you've probably heard from stories of the Bermuda Triangle. A lot of the times, if somebody's traveling through, they have their gauges and stuff start going haywire.
Oh yeah, like the compass starts like spinning and shit.
Yeah. And so they kind of think that there's some sort of strange magnetic anomaly that's in the middle of that triangle, and it flares up from time to time. Some theories are it could be some sort of volcanic activity that's releasing some sort of magnetic field. but no one can precisely put their finger on it, and that's why it's so mysterious and it's so fascinating to me. Is like we have all this technology, like we said a little while ago. We have all this technology to GPS tracking and all this stuff, but it still cannot explain where these ships and planes go. They just disappear and they're gone. Kind of like the missing 411 we talked about. It's like these people just up and vanish, and there's nothing left of them. And that seems to be the trend with any ships that go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. It's pretty wild. Another theory that I came across that actually Mike and I talked about a little bit was the bubbles of gas that come from the vents underneath the ocean in that part of the Atlantic. These bubbles, they rise up from the vents, and what they do is they actually mess with the buoyancy of ships, and will actually like what's a good example? You ever seen that experiment where the people have the sand? They have like a pool of sand. And at first, it's solid. You can walk across it. But then once you start pumping air through the bottom of it, it becomes quicksand, and you sink through it. So they believe that could also be what's causing these ships to just sink out of nowhere. And there's been cases where like a little bit of water has been in a ship, and that will actually affect the buoyancy when this gas hits it. Oh my God, he's being so annoying. So... Yeah, fuck. Just lost myself. So the
it's
buoyancy...
a plausible scientific explanation as to why a ship could just go down, or a plane could just go down out of nowhere.
And most documentaries, I watched a few documentaries on Bermuda Triangle while I was researching this, and they were actually doing experiments with a cylinder filled with water with a buoyancy ball in it. And they showed when the water wasn't moving, there was no air in the water, it would float normal like a boat. But then once they started pumping air up through the bottom, it would start to sink. It wouldn't fully go to the bottom, but it was enough that it could sink and take on water. And that's a pretty plausible. I think that's a pretty plausible explanation for how the boats go missing. But that wouldn't explain airplanes.
The planes, right?
But that I think could come down to it could be a mix of like human error mixed with storms that appear in the Atlantic. Because if you think about it, like we're humans, we have flaws, we have weaknesses. Our brains work against us every once in a while.
Some of us.
Some of us, I can't vouch for that. So they're saying a lot of times it's vertigo, and when you go into deep clouds, you can kind of get this like forced vertigo that you kind of forget where your orientation is because you're surrounded by clouds and white. And they say that might have also been a factor in how the planes went missing themselves.
If you're flying by instrument rather than vision. Like, so if it's super cloudy and there's something fucking with your instrumentation and that's how you're flying.
Yes. So it's a mix of a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And the who knows with the hardware, what could be causing the hardware mishaps. But the getting vertigo is a real thing, and it actually happened to JFK Jr. I don't know if you guys know his story. He died in a plane crash. He was flying. I want to say to Nantucket or something. I forget.
Off of Nantucket. Yep.
Yeah. So he it happened to him. He ended up getting disoriented. They claimed that he got vertigo because of it, and because of that, he ended up upside down, and he crashed. You can look in research into that. There's all kinds of theories, but that's kind of the main theory that everyone seems to kind of stick to, and that would make sense happening in the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, there's so many different Gulf streams that are kind of mixing together in the Atlantic, and any kind of storm could have just appeared out of nowhere and just messed with these pilots as they were flying through. That is to me, the most rooted in reality, and made the most sense to me. But then of course, I had to dig a little bit deeper and see what else people were saying. And one of the ones that kind of blew me away was there's a theory going around that there's actually a mini black hole in the middle of the ocean. And that's what's causing all of the weird magnetic anomalies that are messing with instrumentation and just like turning these ships and planes around so they don't know where they're going, and it's just kind of messing with everything involved in it. it's very far. It's kind of far-fetched, but I actually
Yeah.
think that's the most fascinating of them all. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to think about, like, oh shit, a black hole being underwater. I mean, when we think of a black hole, we think of, you know, a point that's so it's so dense that it just sucks light in and everything. But why couldn't there be an anomaly that a dense point that messes with your magnetics? Like, I mean, the whole Earth is surrounded by magnetic fields. Like, it would make sense if there was something in there that messes with your inspiration and whatnot.
But it's more than just crash ships, right?
Yeah.
It's ships
Because
and
that would be an easy explanation. If there was just a mechanical thing,
Yeah.
then you could kind of say that it was probably storm, human error, or gas, like natural event, like a gas. But it's not just that, right? Because some of these, when you say they go missing, they go missing.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So if you got vertigo and you went down, like they found JFK's plane, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
yes. Yes.
the Bermuda, like the vast majority, from my understanding of those ships that go missing, they're not there.
Yeah, they're completely gone. But you got to remember too, this is 1.5 million square miles of water. I mean, that's a lot of water. That's very deep. So I mean,
Yeah.
it could be easy for a ship to just go completely missing and we never see it
Sure.
again. But then it gets into, like, then we talk about, like, the GPS. It's like, how can we not pinpoint it with GPS?
Yeah.
What kind of weird things are going on? And there is definitely something unusual going on with that area. We just don't know, and that's kind of why we're talking about it today. It's so fascinating that there's just no explanation 70 years later on how these ships keep disappearing with the technology we have over the last 20 years. And stuff still goes missing. I think the most recent ship, I didn't write the date down. I want to say it was like 2017 was the most recent missing boat that had gone through the Bermuda Triangle. And it's created it's created a superstition. There's like pilots that just will not go through that area. They refuse to fly over. They'll go around it. Just because of all the stories that have happened and how mysterious it is. And it's really fascinating. I like the alien angle, too, because there's a part of me that still wants aliens to be here and to get us and get us off this goddamn planet.
Yeah.
But that's the logical part of my brain kind of looks at the more natural occurring things in the ocean and weather patterns and that stuff. But it's pretty fascinating. And that gas, by the way, that I mentioned earlier from the vents is methane. I was trying to remember the name of the gas, but there are vents under the Atlantic Ocean deep down that release methane, and that will actually mess with the buoyancy of the ship.
I wonder too if there was a significant amount of methane, what would happen if a plane flew through it? If that would have an effect.
Who knows? Because methane is less dense than oxygen. So, right? I think, or is it the other way around? I forget. But yeah, it could mess with the way that a plane stays in the air.
Well, isn't
Or methane? Like, what happens if a jet intakes methane?
Yeah.
Because it's super flammable, right?
I was just
Yeah,
about
if
to
it
say that
sparks,
it's explosive, and if you got a jet engine going, producing who knows how hot of a fire, right?
Yeah.
And then that catches the methane, right? That thing could just go in an instant
Yeah.
before
And most of
anybody even knows what's happening.
Yeah, a lot of these planes that I was seeing going down too were on the jet side. So they had, a flame source. So that could be very likely. Like if you just got surrounded by methane and you just became a fireball.
Yeah.
And it just evaporated. Who knows how hot it got? It could have just evaporated the metal. Like,
You need to ask someone who knows enough about gas and dissipation.
Yeah, we need a scientist.
Well, I heard a
we have
theory
a scientist
once.
we can call in.
I heard a theory once along that lines, not to change the subject, but because it's kind of related to being surrounded by like gas and explosion, is if you ever heard of spontaneous human combustion.
Oh yeah.
When people just like randomly burst into flames. I read a theory once, and I don't remember where I read it, but it pretty much said the same thing. Like if the conditions are right, and there's a lot of gas accumulating around a human, that you are even producing yourself, right? Because we release methane, when
Yeah.
we fart and stuff and burp, right? If there's a big buildup of gas around you or even inside of you, and there's enough of a spark from something around you, then you'll go up in flames, and that's what could be causing that phenomenon too. So if that's correct, I don't see a reason why it couldn't happen if all the variables were increased with something larger like a plane or a boat.
Yeah.
And then
you
is
think
it
about
the wick?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, the wick effect. Mitch?
Yeah.
When there's enough fat in a human body that it acts like candle wax
Yep.
and allows the flame to burn, so that it burns all the remains, and then you just have like shoes left.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
that explains why people went and be like, "Well, they spontaneously just exploded." You're
Yeah.
like, "Nah, bro, they burned for hours,
Yeah,
and it just burned hot enough and long enough that everything melted."
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Another angle too could be, I mean, gas can get into anywhere. It could just have filled the plane up and suffocated the pilot, and he just crashed into the ocean. Like,
Or tripped him out enough where he didn't know what he was doing. 'Cause
exactly.
If you're flying a jet, man, like especially military jets, it still makes my brain hurt to think about how fast those guys are going, the amount of things they have to keep track of in order to keep the plane, and they are just like rocketing at such a high speed.
Yeah.
And the
Like,
amount
you
of
gotta-
gravity on their body too. I mean, that sucks all the air out of your body if you're going fast enough.
Yeah, there's a reason they have to wear like special suits and special masks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
those. What do they call those suits? They squeeze so that your blood pressure stays at a good
Compression
level. I
suit?
forget- What is it?
Yeah, like compression. Yep.
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
compression
yeah.
suit. Yeah, but they fill it with like, I think it has CO2 pouches or something, and they like inflate and deflate. That stuff's wild. Beyond me, but that stuff's pretty fascinating. But yeah, so I mean, it's still very much Bermuda Triangle is still very much a mystery. I know we touched upon like several things that could have happened, but like we just don't know. But me personally, I'm leaning towards the gas theory, where just because I've seen experimentation of an object in water being surrounded by gas and sinking, and then what we just talked about with suffocating or bursting into flames, and you'd never see that fire because it's over the ocean. It crashes into the ocean. There's no smoke or anything. There's no fire. So that very much could be a possibility for the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm kind of excited to hear. I liked hearing all your guys' inputs on that. I did not think about the spontaneous combustion aspect of it.
Did you run into any or did you check out any of like the anecdotal stories from out of that area? And I don't remember for sure, but there were like a few crazy stories over the years that I've heard. Like one that I just remembered now was there was a pilot, and I think this was Bermuda Triangle. Again, this is idiots just trying to relay information that they heard or read. But I think it was a pilot. I think it was Bermuda Triangle. He flew into like a cloud, like a heavy, dense fog.
Yeah.
He radios in. He goes radar invisible.
Okay.
They lose radio contact with him. And then the pilot shows up. I'm just bullshitting here. 30 minutes later, and he's off course hundreds of miles in a distance that would be incapable for that plane to travel.
Huh.
And the reason, again, I'd have to look all this up because I heard this maybe on like
I didn't
Coast to
come across
Coast
that
years
story.
ago or some shit. But the thing that was wild about this one is we have checkpoint A, where he has like him radioing in. Also, someone's watching him, without being there on radar. They can see him.
Yep.
And then checkpoint B. So now you have a record of this guy being here, and then he's gone, and now he's here. And the math that we have on how the world works doesn't fill in those 2 points.
Yeah, and that kind of sounds like Barney and Betty Hill too, where they had that whole block of memory that just disappeared, and they ended up in a different place. Now we're kind of getting onto alien territory again. Like it could be. I mean, now with the disclosure of the Pentagon saying that those UFOs were legit. Who knows? It could have been involved in the Bermuda Triangle. Those things could have been interfering with our ships and planes.
I don't remember exactly what he said happened within that time because the guy was cognizant for all of it, other than like I can't get anyone on my radio.
Yeah.
And seeing the fog, and I might be conflating stories, so I don't know if I should throw this in. But this might be that same story, or this might be a different story where a pilot reports seeing a plane 20, 30, 40 years old that shouldn't be in the air. So he's like, well, I saw this other plane, it was this serial number or whatever, and then come to find out that was a plane from World War II, and now this is 1994 that the guy's flying, and there was no, vintage planes out at the same time.
Yeah. Which I did come across a couple stories.
Yeah, so
of
it's like the
people talking
weird...
about that, yeah.
Which
where they
again
think
is...
it's a wormhole that's actually traveling
Yeah.
in time. And people from World War II are coming back through and appearing now, and yeah, it's kind of gets a little wild.
And there are enough anecdotal stories, which is super sexy, but also that is an explanation, whether or not it's scientifically found. It's an explanation for why these planes just disappear, because they shouldn't go off radar even if they sink. There are missing steps in between for normal explanations. So whatever's happening to them, we don't have that math yet to explain it, but something is definitely happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun as hell to look into. I had a lot of fun
Oh, yeah.
researching this Bermuda Triangle stuff. It's always been a fascination of mine. I've always been a big fan of that mystery because it is so terrifying.
Yeah.
I went to Bermuda over 10 years ago, and I remember just being like, oh shit, like, we're so close to the tip of it. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is so rad.
Playing with death.
Yeah. Luckily, we flew from Boston to Bermuda, so we didn't have to go through the triangle itself. But, it was on my mind, and I was pretty excited about it.
And did you drag your hammock into your uncle's hut?
Yes. Yeah, that was another good story.
But we have one near us because we're all in New England right now, and we have our own little Bermuda Triangle, triangulation of 3 points where weird shit has happened.
Which I've only heard of this through name, so I'm actually pretty excited to hear about this one. John, take this away.
Yeah, that's the Bridgewater Triangle. That's the one that I researched, and it's in southeastern Massachusetts, which is in all of our collective backyards, right?
Yeah.
And so the defining points of said triangle are Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So that area is, about half hour, 45 minutes south of Boston, and just west of the Cape, basically.
I want to say it's maybe smack dab in the middle of like where I am and where John and Mitch are. I feel like it might be kind of close to like the center point of where we are.
Yeah, like if we were both to drive to meet each other, we would pretty much.
Yes, it would be in that area.
Yeah, we would meet in the triangle.
Yeah, so in addition to the 3 towns that I mentioned, there are 14 other towns that comprise this 200 square mile area, right? So 200 square miles compared to the Bermuda Triangle, which was 1.5 million square miles or something? Yeah. So
it's
this area
significantly smaller.
significantly smaller, and it was coined the Bridgewater Triangle by a person named Loren Coleman, who back in the 1970s coined this area, but he's also the founder of the International Cryptozoology Museum, which Mitch is wearing a shirt of.
Yeah.
We went there. Jarvis unfortunately wasn't able to attend, but it's sort of like the inspiration for this show. We've talked about it before. So this guy, he is from the New England area, coined this term of the Bridgewater Triangle, and because it sort of was a magnet for like weird and unusual and disturbing things to happen for years. I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is a stone dating back to like potentially the early 1400s that is called Dighton Rock. So sorry, let me take a step back here. So like within this triangle, right, 200 square miles, so really very easy to travel to and from. Like the northernmost point to the southernmost point is only like 30 or so miles away from each other. So very drivable and accessible throughout the triangle, not in the middle of the ocean where things are just going to go and disappear. So it's a lot less disappearing stuff and a lot more unusual crypto paranormal things happening. But so like that's the most interesting thing is this place is all across the board. It's like aliens and Bigfoot and big wolves and big cats and thunderbirds that are sometimes described as pterodactyls and floating orbs and Native American Indian like crazy backstories that date back to like King Philip's War. So
I'm gonna come.
all over the place, and this is in our backyard, and when we are safe enough, we need to go and check some of this stuff out. So within this triangle, there are different historic landmarks. So there's Dighton Rock, which I mentioned, right? So Dighton Rock, it's a 40-ton boulder, and it was originally within the riverbed of the Taunton River in Berkeley, Massachusetts. And it was removed from the river during the construction of a dam in the area in 1963 and was moved to like a small, tiny museum in a nearby park. It is a slanted, six-sided block rock that is covered in petroglyphs. Okay. But they have no idea where the petroglyphs from. Some people think it's like Norse Viking origins. Others speculate that there were writings from the Wampanoag people, which are the Native American Indians, like from the area. Yep. But some people even state that it is like ancient Phoenicians or Portuguese, or even from like there are stories of the Chinese discovering America in 1421. So there are all these different stories, and there are some sort of symbols that line up with each of these, I don't want to say ancient. Some are a little bit more modern than others, but they cannot really pinpoint what this comes from. It was, I believe the rock was pointed like towards the bay when they found it in the middle of the river, but they really don't know when that's from. So that's just one of the sort of landmarks that we could go and check out and do a little bit more research. Sort of weird vibes come from that rock, but people don't really say that too many weird things happen within that rock. But so there are other places in the triangle. One of them is called Hockomock Swamp. And so this is the largest freshwater swamp in the state of Massachusetts, and in the Wampanoag language, it translates to place where spirits dwell. So within the swamp, there are several native burial sites. There is one that apparently disappears and reappears depending on your intentions. As the story goes, some people were going there to excavate the burial site, and it disappeared upon like their return to actually go and excavate it, right? So they sort of scouted the site, it was there, and then when they went back to do a little bit more research, it was gone. And it sort of moves, and depending on your intentions, it either shows itself to you or it doesn't. There are also tons of Bigfoot-type sightings within the Hockomock Swamp. Now, there are sort of reports of Bigfoot type of creatures throughout all of the Bridgewater Triangle, but most of these stories happen around this swamp, the swamp of which is like in the northernmost point of the triangle. But like I said, really not that far from the southernmost point, or like the Freetown Fall River State Forest, which is another sort of big area. This is closer to Fall River in the southern part of the triangle. But yeah, like I said, Hockomock Swamp, swampy area, right? So I'm looking for Bigfoot stories. You're getting these other sort of like alien encounters, ghost encounters, and stuff like that, but mostly Bigfoot type creatures, and even some like Pugwudgie stories. So Pugwudgies are a folklore from the Delaware and the Wampanoag, Native American people, and they are these like 4 or so foot tall human-like creatures that like deal in magic. They can disappear and reappear. They can cast spells on you. They shoot arrows at you. All of these sort of different stories based on the Pugwudgie, which is like a native cryptid of this area, of the area of southern New England that we are.
It's like a goblin or like a gnome. A Pugwudgie. Yeah. It's like
it's hairy. It's got a big pot belly.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I immediately pictured
long fingers, long ears. Yeah, they're a little bit more nude than an Ewok, I believe. Not as hairy.
Shit, did somebody catch me walking around the swamp one day?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm reading here, Pugwudgies are also identified by J.K. Rowling in the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah, so in Ilvermorny, which is the house that is in Massachusetts, so there there are Wizard World in America. We're
right.
familiar with the English one in Harry Potter,
Yeah.
but there's a place in Western Massachusetts, and that is one of the houses. So Pukwudgie is actually very similar to the Gryffindor house that we're all familiar with. But you know what? J.K. Rowling, shut your damn mouth. We don't care about your shit no more.
She.
Yeah. So
Good books, good stories, but yeah, she's.
yes, her opinions are garbage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
so I
swamp
mentioned
apes.
earlier, yes, the Freetown Fall River State Forest. So, this is near the city of Fall River, which is sort of a larger metropolitan area in southeastern Massachusetts. It's certainly no Boston, in terms of size, but it's a little bit closer in size to Providence and stuff like that. So, there's this big state forest in that area, and in addition to like the sort of paranormal stuff that we've been talking about, a lot of people mention Bigfoot again, aliens, big creatures, wolves, cats, what have you. There's also a lot of like cult activities that happen within this forest. So I'm talking like animal sacrifice, ritualistic murder, suicides, and like gang-related crime and murder. Now, not to throw Fall River under the bus, but it is a bit of a seedy area, and I think it especially was in the 70s and 80s when a lot of these stories have come about. So
Now,
there have been people arrested and shit. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you think that these rituals had anything to do with the fact that it's kind of like the center of Lovecraft country, that area of Massachusetts?
Yeah, so that's another big part of this whole like thing is like where does this start? Not only why is it happening, but like where are the origins? Are the origins of the sort of Native American tribes that were living in the area? And there's another place. It's called Profile Rock, and it's located within the Fall River State Forest, and it was a site of many important tales from the Wampanoag people. So they're like a local Native American Indian tribe, and they were very heavily involved in King Philip's War, which was like the deadliest war in colonial American history, and it was between the Native American people and the settlers, the white colonials, and like 1 in 10 white colonials died, like of fighting age, died during this war. It was extremely bloody. King Philip, also known as Metacomet, who was the chief of the Wampanoag, and he had this sort of right-hand man. His name was Anawan, and there was a wampum belt that was exchanged between the two men. King Philip, sort of the name of the war was named after him. He took that name from his father, who was also a great chief of the time, Massasoit, I believe is the pronunciation.
That's what Massachusetts is named after, isn't it? Massasoit.
Yeah, a lot of these names are very familiar to us, right? Because there's like Metacomet Boulevard and like Anawan like Forest is a place down here where I ride my bike, and so like all of these names are things that you hear about, but I didn't necessarily realize that the deadliest war in colonial history was taking place
literally in our backyards.
In our backyards, 100%. Like every single town was affected in the southeastern, like Rhode Island, eastern Connecticut, southeastern Massachusetts. All these towns were affected. They were burnt down. There was warfare happening, and there is this belt. Actually. Yeah, which is what? Millis?
Millis is we have the King Philip trees, and that's where King Philip stationed his troops while he was moving south or north. I forget which direction did he move? Did he head south?
Tons of landmarks like that, like little thrones. King Philip's Throne, I believe, is a place in Warren, Rhode Island. There's a lot of, or there's Mount Hope in Bristol, where like a big part of the war went down. So there's this belt that was passed between Metacomet and Anawan, and it went missing. And a lot of people think that belt going missing is like put this curse upon the land, and nothing good will happen until the belt is returned. And so I think that's one of the most interesting things about this area is not only like how is it all happening in the same spot, but like why and how far does it date back to? Does it go back to like 1421 when some sort of Chinese people found America before, you know, Columbus and his dirty ass came around here. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's very interesting because all of these things it's all across the board. It's like satanic rituals all the way to alien orbs and unidentified aerial projections, you know, which is what the Navy now calls UFOs, UAPs.
I don't like that as much.
They just want to be contrarians about it.
Is it projection or is it phenomena?
I believe it is phenomena. Yeah.
Phenomena.
Yeah, so
that's really cool.
All of this different stuff, crazy shit going on in the Bridgewater Triangle.
I have a question. Did you come across, like, is there any connection to, like, the state hospitals that are in Bridgewater and Fall River?
There were no really known stories of that I saw. It was
because
I know there is a lot of that history around this area.
Totally. I mean,
but that might just have to do with
there.
Yeah, that might just have to do with like the negative energy that is. But there was not many stories. I watched a few documentaries, a couple things on YouTube, like sort of read down the Wikipedia page, and there wasn't much connection there between the hospitals and the weird stuff that's going on.
Now, it's very fascinating, though. I really like that. It's cool.
Now, the thing that interests me the most, right, about the whole concept here is kind of going along with what you said, John, like how far back does this go? Is this area does the triangle exist because of the each area is individually strange, or are these areas collectively strange due to the existence of this triangle? Like, if you get what I'm trying to say, like, for instance, all the ghost stories that we have around here, right? Is that a result of the triangle, or is the triangle just a result of us taking these isolated instances and like trying to group it all together, right? That's the part that kind of interests me in the long run, is when you start getting into like esoteric theories about energy and all that kind of stuff,
ley lines, convergence lines.
Yep, exactly, right? So that's the fascinating part.
So many elements, like it's even almost like a character study, watching these sort of documentaries that have these confessionals with local people of the area, people that basically white dudes that look like if you combined our 4 features and put them in like a roulette ball and like mixed up, they would look like one of us. You know what I mean? They talk the same way, they have the same mannerisms, and you can really see the humanization in these people. And then you sort of think like what the fuck are these people talking about? How credible are they? How reliable is their word? You know what I mean? Because like, as much as I want to think that I'm credible, someone listening to this podcast might think that I'm just a schmuck. So I'm watching these docs thinking like, oh man, this fucking guy from Bridgewater, he's just like, I was out in my kayak and I think I saw something. It was down by the river. It looked, I was a couple beers deep. I'm going to be honest with you. It's like, okay, all right, hold on, buddy. Like, you fucking just like, because you were like from Swampscott or some bullshit. Shut the fuck up,
I almost spilled my donkeys.
Yeah,
I seen a pugwadgie with a Mets hat on. I want to beat its ass.
I want to fucking kick its ass. It said 1986 on this. I don't know why I'm New York all of a sudden. But,
this is Red Sox territory. Get out of here.
It's very towny. Okay. It gets very towny and shit. And it's like, okay, well, like, and even the guy, even Lauren Coleman, right? The guy who coined the term, he created the museum. I mean, we went to the museum, Mike and Mitch. That dude's picture is up there almost as much as Bigfoot's picture. Like, he's
You're not
there's
wrong.
There's a certain amount, there's a certain amount of credibility that comes with wanting to put yourself on camera, I think. And not that it's necessarily a bad thing. Getting the word out there, I think, is important. And but even in the documentaries that I watch, they talk about the credibility of people who are like, oh, no, they didn't want to tell us their name. They didn't, because that is almost more credible. It's like, oh, interesting. They're not necessarily in it for any sort of news chasing or headlines or anything. They're just like, listen, this is what I saw, and I am pretty damn sure of what I saw, and I need to share it with someone, but I don't necessarily want my name attached to it. So that's an interesting angle too. There is so much to dig into about this specific triangle, and
but that's like
I think
the old UFO stuff, right? Because there could be
Yep.
1,000 stories. All it takes is one to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's the same thing. And I think Mitch raises a very interesting question that we'll never get an answer for.
Right.
But the correlation, so the Bermuda Triangle now and the Bridgewater Triangle, is it just some dude assigning 3 arbitrary points to describe an area of weird shit? Or if you drained that area in the ocean that the Bermuda Triangle encompasses and you built houses there, what stories would those people tell?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like also going back to Missing 411, when that guy was looking into the things. Now, there's going to be bias no matter what, just because that's how humans are built. But he was able to put together clusters of disappearances. So within the grander scheme, like, there seemed to be congealed areas of weirdness. So is
Right.
this something that just naturally happens on the planet? It's just odd enough that Bridgewater happens to be an area on land, so there are more humans to have odd experiences.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's just a slow leak of gas. You know, maybe there's a particular gas that will make you trip balls, right? Or maybe there are mushrooms growing in the swamp that you can get psilocybin in through your skin.
Yeah.
So they're doing this, and then they pick up some like trip water. It's like there could be a million different possible
And
explanations.
you think
but-
about swamps too; they naturally release methane gas.
Yeah.
That's all coming back.
But
to
I don't know if that
the
makes you hallucinate.
But it could. I mean, if you cut off oxygen to your brain, if there's enough methane, I mean,
Sure.
it will make you
See
go
all
loopy.
sorts of funky
Sure.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could very much be an effect that's caused by this swamp.
When I was doing my research, right, going along what Mike is saying about how you got these concentrated areas of like these strange things, I came across what's called vile vortices, and I'm not smart enough to fully understand it because it starts getting into like physics and
Okay.
and science and all that kind of stuff. But basically, this guy Ivan Andersons, he's pretty well known in like the paranormal world because he was like a big person with like cryptozoology and all that kind of stuff. Basically, he pinpointed these locations on the longitude and latitude grids of the Earth. And those are called vortices, and there's like 12 of them that are all like equilaterally equal distance from each other, that all have weird stuff that goes on in them, or weird stories about them. Like, for instance, one of them is the Bermuda Triangle. Another one is the Dragon's Triangle. Another one is like the North Pole, which, if you know all the crazy stories about the North Pole, of like, some people say there's like a hidden civilization under the North Pole, and there's also been expeditions to the North Pole that have just like gone missing.
Well, there's that research base too, where they had the alien take over their bodies and start to copy each other. Remember, it started as like
Oh my
a dog.
god, yeah, that is
that ran
yeah,
in.
dude, that story's
Yeah.
so crazy.
That
There's
was
like
a
the
wild
dog
story.
at the other place and they get chased by the helicopter.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
And then they have to like figure out who's an alien and who's not. And
Yeah,
dogs'
yeah, yeah.
faces
Yeah.
are
Yeah,
opening
they,
up.
yeah,
Oh.
they did
And you
something
can
with
tell
like
because-
testing their blood or something. One dude was like super confident, like, let me show you what I already know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the best scenes in movie history is that blood test.
Oh,
scene. I
for
love
sure,
that
for
scene.
sure. No,
Sorry,
no,
I'm
no,
sorry
no.
to interrupt.
But still, it's interesting to think. Like, I didn't look enough into it, and some I want to maybe return to in the future. But it'd be interesting to really dive into it and see, like, where are all these places? Do all these places line up with stuff that we've just been hearing about all the time? Whether it's like where a lot of the, like, for instance, with Missing 411, right? Where are most of those clusters, and do any of them coordinate to these particular points in this grid?
You should
And
try to look into that. for
yeah,
sure.
and
That's
then
fascinating.
the next question is like, all right, well, if all this stuff is coordinating to these areas, why? Like, what is going on? So
That's interesting. I'd never heard of vile vortices, and I just looked it up. Now I want to really.
yeah,
really
it's
dive
another
into
thing that like I never heard of until I'm glad we did this episode, because like I came into this almost knowing almost nothing, And
Yeah.
I feel like I've walked away with like a whole bunch more rabbit holes to go down. So
Yeah, definitely more questions than I had starting this episode. That's for sure.
Yeah, for
and
sure,
We've
for sure.
We're only halfway through our triangles. At this
oh
point.
yeah.
That's awesome. Man, Vile Vortices is such a badass name too. Like I feel like that should be a metal band.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
Yeah.
sounds like an
Or lead singer's name.
yeah.
Or that's a concept album.
Yeah,
about
or like an
cryptozoology.
album. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like a doom metal
Vile
album.
vortices. It definitely is. It
You
has
guys
to
want to
be.
start a metal band? We already got the name, dude. Oh, that's
Sick.
really cool. That's really fascinating. That Bridgewater Triangle stuff is awesome, and I love that how close it is to us. We, like you said, we have to visit that. We have to go see
Yeah,
that
hell yeah.
rock. Now, I had a question before. I didn't want to interrupt before. Does the rock still have the glyphs on it? Like, can you see
Yes.
the writing and stuff? See,
Yeah.
I really want to see that. I think that's
Yeah, some of them
fascinating.
are like very deep, like very, very deep, and they think like the certain
gouged
tools that
in?
needed to be used to make them go that deep are questionable. And
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So let's
And
go
they
check it
can't-
out.
They
Dighton-
can't like
Dighton
carbon
Rock.
date something like that. Like they can't
They,
figure
I
out
don't.
like
they
when it-
they haven't. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's just like fucking local. I have no idea.
See,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
the thing that people always forget about like the carbon dating and all that stuff is, for some reason, it's ridiculously expensive to actually do it. So like, you would need somebody
Yeah.
who has that expendable money, who's interested enough in the subject, because like scientists aren't just gonna test it because, you know, like
Can they
Yeah.
do it on rock?
I'm pretty sure you
I don't
can
know.
carbon date rock. I mean,
I thought you needed like some kind of like plant material or like life material, like because
Something that has
rock.
grown and taken the carbon in
Yeah,
at
well-
different points in time.
well, there is, but we have ways of dating rocks because like they
Yes,
date
we do.
rocks all the time. I don't know if it's carbon dating, but
because
I exclusively
someone would
dated
have,
rocks.
Someone would have carbon dated the Sphinx at this point, if that was possible.
That's
and I
true,
thought
yeah.
that one of the reasons why they didn't, so their explanation for their guesstimations for the age have always been a result of like the weathering and the signs on the
Yeah.
rock because they didn't have like life or plant material. They couldn't actually pull a
okay.
machine date.
So
on
then
it.
if it's,
I think
yeah,
I'm an idiot. I don't know.
that's all right. I'm an
think I
idiot
read
too, but
Good.
yeah.
Ship of
so
fools
the thing,
we're
I
flying
guess
Yeah.
carbon dating
Prob-
wouldn't be an option then, theoretically on paper.
Yeah, that's because it's like it seems even if it's expensive, you'd think someone would have thrown out the money even just to write the book.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you had the exclusive rights, like I would feel confident pitching an idea, being like, "Yo, I'll drop the $60,000 or whatever it is to run this one test, so I can write a book because I have the exclusive test that I'm going to reveal the results in my book, and then recoup that money and more."
It is
Right?
saying right here, radiocarbon dating is a method of determining the age of an object containing organic material by using the properties of radiocarbon. it
Okay,
has
so
to
if
have
the
some
rock
sort of
doesn't have any
material.
organic material, yeah.
But who knows what they wrote? Because it looks like it's white, so I mean, it could have been some sort of dye. Maybe,
Oh,
that
yeah.
could have some sort of organic material within it.
Yeah, it's possible.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, if it was just gouges in the rock, I would say no dice. But who knows what that chalky material is? It could be.
Which you could date the chalk, but I could go up to a rock and put some chalk on it, and then that's
True.
going to come
Yeah.
up as
Yeah.
today.
True.
So I don't know, but it's super. And that's in a museum now? You said, John?
Yeah, it's a small little gazebo, like with a small little placard. It's nothing fancy or anything, but it's right in Dighton
Okay.
Rock State
right.
Park, which is
Yeah,
So it's they
Yeah.
they didn't move this tons of rock into like a building somewhere.
no, they did.
Oh, they did.
It's a
They moved
small
the whole
building.
rock.
They moved it. They took
Oh,
it out of the riverbed and moved it like not far,
Okay.
but
Okay.
just like right there.
I thought for some reason they built like a gazebo around it where it was,
Yeah.
but
Oh no, they moved it because then they flooded the riverbed after they dammed up the river.
Which
so
is good.
then
Thank
it-
God they moved the rock. 'Cause
yeah,
otherwise you have all that water
Thank-
damage.
Yep, thank
it,
God.
it wouldn't be
Thank
what it
the
is
Lord
today.
himself.
You
Yep.
son of
It was
We
the
all
Lord
know
that
Ma-
put it there.
We all know Massachusetts history with floodings, right? With the Quabbin
Yeah.
Reservoir and how they buried towns.
Yeah.
We can get into that in another episode, but that's some pretty fascinating stuff too.
Yeah, so Mitch, we sort of touched on the vial vortices and how your triangle is closely related to Jarvis's triangle. Would you like to extrapolate?
Sure, why not? Let me just pull up
I'm really
my,
excited for this.
Oh, hold on. Let me just pull up my notes here. All right. So, here's the thing, is that ships have been going mysteriously missing in the Philippine Sea for like thousands of years, right? So, if you don't know where the Philippine Sea is, Japan in East Asia, right? So you got China right about here, and then as you go north, you get into Manchuria, and then Korea is the little peninsula, and then Japan is kind of, at the midpoint. It starts in northern China, is where the southernmost isle of Japan is, and it kind of goes up towards past Korea into Russia, and the Philippine Sea is the sea that's south of Japan. So where Tokyo is, it starts there, and then it goes all the way down into like the Philippines and Malaysia and all that, right? So the Philippine Sea has been the source of, natural disasters for its entire history, right? It's known for producing like some of the most devastating typhoons and tsunamis in history. So the earliest story that I have that relates to the Dragon's Triangle, which is in the Devil's Sea, the Philippine Sea, they call it the Devil's Sea, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But the earliest story I have goes back to 1000 BC, circa 1000 BC, amongst the Chinese. And the Chinese used to call the Philippine Sea the Sea of the Dragon. I couldn't find what it was originally in its original Chinese, but they had legends that basically said that that sea was home to a massive dragon that used to swim beneath the waves and used to cause storms and used to attack ships and do all sorts of stuff like that. So the thing you gotta know going into this about dragons in East Asia, especially with China and Japan and Korea, is dragons over there are a lot different than like dragons we have in like the western side of the world, because dragons in China and Japan and stuff, they're more like gods than actual like monsters. So they're like divine forces of nature and they're usually associated with bodies of water. So they like cause storms, and they cause weather effects, and they're responsible for the creation of rivers and things like that. So for instance, in China there's the Amur River, which in Chinese is Heilongjiang, which means the Black Dragon River, right? So dragons play an important role in these places' mythologies. So in the 1200s, for instance, the Mongol Empire, which was the largest continuous land empire that ever exists, they decided in 1274 to launch an invasion of Japan. And they fought a few successful battles against the Japanese on the island of Tsushima. And then the Mongol fleet leaves Tsushima, and Tsushima is just below Korea. So they leave that island and they start sailing around the south of Japan to attack Kyushu, which is Japan's southernmost island. And by doing that, they entered the Philippine Sea. The entire Mongol fleet, which included 200 ships and about 30,000 soldiers, were completely annihilated by a massive typhoon that originated from the Philippine Sea and completely took out the fleet. So out of the 30,000 of that fleet, only less than half of them survived and actually made it back to the Mongol Empire. Now, where it gets interesting,
they had a name for that too, didn't they call that?
Yes. Well, no. I'm getting to that. Right. So the weird thing.
I'm sorry.
No. It's good. Right. I'm glad you brought it up because it sets building things up. Right. So the weird thing is that same event occurs again in almost a near identical way when the Mongols attempt to invade Japan again in 1281. Right, where the Mongol fleet, which is much larger this time, because their mentality was like, there's no possible way that could happen again. That was a fluke. We almost beat the Japanese with 30,000 guys. If we send even more, this is going to be over in a year. So they send So they send a fleet of 140,000 soldiers. and they enter the Philippine Sea. They do the same thing. They attack Tsushima. They win at Tsushima. They go around to attack Kyushu. They enter the Philippine Sea. A massive typhoon comes again and wipes out the entire fleet of 140,000. Less than 40,000 of them survive and manage to return to China. And after that, the Mongol Empire was like, fuck this. They never launched another invasion of Japan ever again.
No more
so
Japan.
The Japanese gave those typhoons a name. They call them kamikaze, which translates to divine wind. Now, you probably know kamikaze from what the pilots in World War II used to show when they used to do the suicide attacks on American ships. That's what they were doing. They were channeling that spirit of like the Japanese protector that comes from the Philippine Sea. But the Japanese have another name for the Philippine Sea too. They call the Philippine Sea Ma no Umi, which translates to Devil's Sea, right? So the sea has always had this like divine reputation about it. From the Chinese with like there's a dragon god who lives there, to the Japanese being like this is the sea of the devil, to the divine wind came from the sea to save Japan twice, right? So going further, right? The name the Dragon's Triangle comes from the Chinese legend about the dragon that lives there. And the Japanese, they borrowed a lot of their culture that they have now from China. Like, for instance, their written language of kanji, they borrowed from Chinese characters. They borrowed a lot of their religions and traditions and stuff like that. So it all kind of meshes together. So they have the same legends about this place, right? So when people started doing research into this area in about the 70s, the 60s and 70s, and they started to notice weird similarities about this particular sea and the Bermuda Triangle and the weird stuff that goes on in there, they coined the name Dragon's Triangle to, kind of draw that comparison, right? So the Dragon's Triangle itself, the exact points of the triangle are so open to debate that it's almost wrong to call it a triangle and just say like the entire sea is the triangle. So typically the northern point is the only consistent point, and it starts at the sea right below Tokyo. The eastern point of the triangle can be as short as the Bonin Islands, which are just below Tokyo. They're like maybe a few hundred miles away. Or it can go all the way south to like the Philippines and Malaysia, which is a massively long distance. The western point sometimes goes only as far as Okinawa, which is not very far from Japan at all. Or it can go all the way down to Taiwan, which is way further away near the southern coast of China. Or even sometimes past that, going all the way to like Thailand, right? So sometimes it like encompasses nearly all of the sea, and sometimes it even includes parts of the South China Sea, right? So here's an interesting fact for you. The Dragon's Triangle, like this center point of the Philippine Sea, is at the exact opposite side of the planet as the Bermuda Triangle. So like if you were to start at the Bermuda Triangle and dig straight through, right, in a straight perfect line, you'd end up in the center of the Dragon's Triangle. So
shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's crazy,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
So now there's hundreds of stories of like disappearing ships in the area that have been known to Japan for like centuries, but it's only really in like the past 80 years that the region has become known to the Western world. And that kind of starts in the 1950s, kind of similar to the Bermuda Triangle, is when you start getting like the modern disappearances that really start to get known. And it's also an area that's known for like really weird phenomena, including sightings of cryptids, there's alien sightings here, ghosts, right? So one that I found really interesting was during World War II, there's a Japanese pilot, his name is Toshiaki Long, and he's fighting in an aerial battle against the U.S. forces in the South Pacific, in the Philippine Sea, in the area that pretty much would be the Dragon's Triangle. And during the battle, he reports, right, that he sees a 150-foot serpentine-like creature beneath the waves, moving through the sea, like it's observing the battle. He said that it had like these two massive wings that it used to propel itself through the water. So basically, according to this guy, he saw a dragon in the ocean. Now, realistically, right? Realistically, it's a little far-fetched, especially because, like, as far as I know, there's no other witnesses to this event. I would imagine that, like, if there was a dragon in the ocean and, you know, the Japanese and U.S. forces were fighting and they both saw the gigantic dragon, I think the battle would have stopped and they would have been like, hey, there's literally, Godzilla hadn't been invented yet, but they'd be like, hey, there's literally Godzilla in the water. We should we should do something about that first. So,
I don't know.
Look a little further.
I could see both sides.
Yeah.
I could see not noticing.
That's fair. That's
You're
fair.
getting fucking shot at. You're in the middle of the war. You're not, like, looking down. You're looking for the other pilots.
Yeah, that's, you know, that
Like,
is a good point. That is a
if
good
there
point.
wasn't
You're trying
ever a
not
time
to-
you wouldn't
yeah.
be looking around.
Yeah, that's true. But you would figure, though, like, with planes in the air, like, you know, radioing back to their commanders, like, hey, there's this fucking big thing in the water that
Sure.
doesn't look like an enemy ship, but looks really dangerous to us, you know?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, I agree, Mike. I can see going both ways, too. So, 1952, wars ended, right? Japan's getting rebuilt with the help of the U.S., right?
Yeah.
Ships have been going missing in that sea for years now for the Japanese, for pretty much as long as Japan has existed. They've had stories about this place. So, 1952, September, the Japanese government, they send a ship with a team of researchers to the Bonin Islands, which are just kind of below Tokyo. They're in the Dragon's Triangle. And they are sending them there specifically to investigate what could be making these ships disappear. So the ship's called the Kayu Maru, number 5, and it leaves harbor with a crew of 31 people. The trip is fine. They report perfect weather, no like anomalies at all the way up until September 24th, which is when they just lose all contact with this ship, right? The ship just vanished. It sunk, or it just like disappeared. It went very quickly. Suddenly, it was like they had contact with it and then gone. No clear sign of like any typhoon or tsunami, anything like that. So that sinking or disappearance, people are pretty sure that the ship sunk, but they have no idea how. So that disappearance of the Kayu Maru, number 5, has led the Japanese government to declare the area an official danger zone and advised against travel in it. So then, it almost happens again. In 1955, there's another ship. It's a retired warship. Both of these ships are retired warships, so it's not like they're ancient old, you know, merchant vessels from like 1910. These are like modern warships for the time. Another ship, the Shinyo Maru, number 10, goes into this area and loses contact with the Japanese authorities for several days while they're there. Now, fortunately, they were found safely on January 15th because they left at, like, they pretty much left January 1st, and then they lost contact with them somewhere around, like, the 10th or 11th. So, like, they had no contact with them for several days, but they fortunately found them. But they didn't report anything strange on the ship, just the fact that, like, it was totally weird. Like, they had no radio signal, they couldn't get in contact with anything, couldn't send out, like, any SOS or anything like that, right? So, between 1950 and 1955, a total of 9 modern Japanese retired warships and a total crew of like 700 people have mysteriously vanished inside the Dragon's Triangle. And disappearances continue on all the way up to this day, where like merchant ships and cargo ships going through that area will sink, go missing. Planes go missing too. They either crash or disappear. It's very Bermuda Triangle-esque. Now, other stuff that happens is the area's always been a source of like ghost sightings, right? So things like seeing ghostly apparitions in the water, or ghostly apparitions appearing on ships, mysterious ghostly lights in the distance, or even sightings of like ghostly ships, right? So one legend I found goes back to the 1800s in Japan that says that during nights on the Devil's Sea, while, you know, on a ship, you can see there's a ghostly ship that looks like one of those ships for burning incense, right? So it's got like a shape like that, and then it's got like a covering over it, and it's got the, you know, like the big ceramic pot vase thing, and that ship, it's crewed by a woman, a lone woman. She never acknowledges the presence of another ship, but it's also like impossible to catch up to her. Now, UFO activity has also been reported over the Devil's Sea for years. So in the 1980s, there's a Soviet researcher. He's aboard a Soviet vessel. I couldn't remember his name when I was typing up these notes, but I found this in a documentary that I watched on YouTube. So he has a sighting where he's in the Devil's Sea in pretty much the Dragon's Triangle. He sees a cylindrical craft that rockets out of the water into the sky, and it fills the entire sky with like intense blue light for several seconds before it just goes right back down into the depths. Now, there's a Google Earth photo from above the Dragon's Triangle that circulates around on the internet, so you have to take it with a grain of salt because it could very easily be fake. But it appears to show 4 mysterious circular metallic objects above the water that have an appearance like flying saucers. So now there's been several studies of the area that have noted that it's home to very frequent volcanic activity, and it's filled with undersea volcanoes, which is where a lot of like the tsunamis come from, because what happens with a tsunami is volcanic activity produces that earthquake, and it makes the big wave. So today, though, recent science has posited that the true culprit behind a lot of the sinkings in the Dragon's Triangle, it's not a dragon, it's not UFOs, it's not even the typhoons. Instead, there's volcanic eruptions that can happen, and what happens is they launch pressurized water upwards several hundred, sometimes even thousands of feet above the water, and it happens like near instantaneously, and it can, if that thing hits a ship, it'll rip that thing apart in a second, right? So this phenomena has been observed happening numerous times, but to my knowledge, it's never been observed actually sinking a ship within the sea. Although I think there was at least once where it was actually a real close call, so it is definitely possible. And so that's like the rational scientific explanation. But me personally, I kind of like the idea of an angry dragon god sinking ships. That's my favorite.
Yes.
I'm into that. Wow, that's fascinating as hell.
And
Yeah.
again,
That's really
doesn't
cool.
explain the sightings.
Yep.
Doesn't explain the missing and never found.
Yep.
Because if you had a ship that got ripped apart, you'd find something, right?
Yeah. But that's also,
Yeah.
like the Bermuda Triangle, that's in a very crazy weather
Remote.
area. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Because,
yes.
I mean, they have typhoons, we have hurricanes over here. Like, that's a very active area for different high and low fronts that come through, that area. So, I mean, that could also be what's making these ships disappear. Is like they might just be blowing the debris everywhere.
Yeah.
Did you come across anything about the methane, too?
I didn't
Coming
come
from that
across
area?
anything about methane gas.
Yeah.
Although,
But if there's volcanoes,
I would
volcanoes,
imagine
it
there
makes
would be,
sense.
right? So in
Yeah.
a way, it makes me wonder, because we're talking about the methane gas with the Bermuda Triangle and like that getting launched up. I wonder if the same thing can happen with the Bermuda Triangle, where you have these volcanoes that are launching all this pressurized water. It literally is like a geyser, right?
Yeah,
And it just
yeah.
goes straight up, and just like, if water's traveling at 700 miles per hour or whatever, that thing's gonna cut through anything like a knife cutting through butter. So, like, it could be the same thing is happening there. It could be seismic activity, but
It makes sense because I mean, if you look at both areas on a map, it's a lot of islands, and islands are formed by volcanoes. So it very much makes sense that could be the culprit for this being such an active area.
And super interesting being on exact opposite sides.
That
of
is
the planet.
fascinating. I had
Yes,
no
that's
idea
so
about
cool.
that. That's wicked cool.
Yeah, that was
That's
mind-blowing when I first read that. I was like, wait, no, what? And
Yeah.
it's like one of those sentences you had to read a couple of times to make sure you were, like, actually understanding what they're trying to say. And it's like, yeah, that's really, really weird.
So I wonder if, like, underwater in both of these areas, if you look at it, like, if you were to slice the Earth in half,
Yeah.
I wonder if the magma vents would all be connected and just kind of look the same on both ends of the world.
Oh, yeah,
I
that'd
wonder
be
if
tricky.
that's what could be caught. Like, maybe they have the same vents on the ocean floor on both sides of the world. That's wicked fascinating. I had no idea about that, Mitch.
I had no idea
And I
about that.
wonder-
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That,
I
it just
wonder
opens
what's
up
on
so
the
many more
exact-
questions.
What's the exact opposite of Bridgewater?
Oh, I don't know. That's
Somewhere in India, I believe.
So I wonder if India
In the
has
middle
their
of the
own-
in the middle of the Indian Ocean or something. I think is the opposite of like Rhode Island. at
Yeah.
least.
So it's water. It could be something
Interesting.
hidden under there. Some
Huh.
Cthulhu could be hiding under there.
Well, I wonder if that's
Um,
like a site of strange disappearance. I wonder if Bridgewater is one of the vortices, the vital vortices, or like if New England is in general. And I wonder if like
Right.
there's a correlating area, you know, across from it. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
A little off topic, but I wanna talk about, you were talking about the Mongols in
Yeah, yeah.
1257.
1271. Yeah, yeah.
1271. That is the setting of Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is an incredible video game, and if you want any any kind of Japanese culture, it is. Sorry, this is my little plug for the game.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But the main character Jin is also known as the Divine Wind, and he controls the wind.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how he gets. That's how he gets to different areas, and basically the whole story is him dismantling the Mongolians. I thought that was all.
Well,
cool, how
no,
all kinda
it's
connected.
interesting how like even to this day that event played such like a significant role in Japanese history, and the
Absolutely.
Philippine Sea has played such a significant role, and by extension, the Devil Sea and the Dragon's Triangle, to the point like it still shows up nowadays in their culture and also cross culturally, because that's a game developed by like a Western game studio.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they
it's an American company.
But like
yeah.
that whole thing of like the kamikaze in the Divine Wind and the typhoons is all so ingratiated into like the Japanese history and cultural identity at this point that like it shows up just
Totally.
all over the place. It's crazy.
It's really cool. Japanese culture is immensely fascinating, and I would love to get into more of their superstition on a future episode. They have some really cool ghost stories and all that stuff. But yeah, that was awesome, Mitch.
Oh,
Hell
thank
yeah,
you.
you really deep
Hell yeah,
dove
Mitch,
into
thanks.
that. I feel like I had no facts compared to you. God damn. Yeah, that was damn, dude. That was awesome. I had another point I wanted to make, but I lost it while I was praising you.
Oh, that's all right.
Can we take a quick break so I can pee and feed Harry?
Yeah, I gotta
absolutely.
pee too.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just gonna.
Okay.
Can I just keep recording? Like I feel
Yeah,
like we should
yeah, I'm
that's
just
fine.
gonna keep
We'll
rolling.
just cut. Maybe we just cut this out.
Yeah, I would
when
just
we-
cut the dead air out.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go piss. I'll be right back.
Yep.
Weak bladder motherfucker. I've been drinking this whole time. I saw Mitch chugging Coke. We ain't scared.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I don't have any pants on and I'm sitting over a bucket, so I'm untouchable.
Well, I like the fact that, you know, because of the drapery that you got going on, we have, like, no context for where you actually are. Especially because, like, I've never been to your house. I don't know what room you're in. So, my official headcanon now, Mike, is that every time you record, you drag your computer and your microphone into the bathroom.
Into the bathroom?
Yep. And you're just chilling out in
dig
there.
it. So when I was in college, the dorm I was off campus housing, but the place I was staying, I had my own bathroom.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I put locks on the door so no one else could get in. And I decorated the shower, like the whole bathroom, to look like this.
Oh, wow.
I had I bought fake plants that were like suction cuppable.
Yeah.
So I had them suction cupped all over the inside of the shower, and just coming out like over the bathroom. And then I was really into monkeys, still am.
Yeah.
So I'd gotten a bunch of stuffed monkeys that I brought out with me, and then my family like sent me 2 or 3 other ones that I tied all around. So my whole bathroom was like jungle landscape, plants, and then like these monkeys hanging off the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's fucking good times.
It's like showering in a rainforest, like in
loved
the
it.
waterfalls of like the Congo Mountains in Africa.
It's a themed bathroom.
Yeah.
It's as good as it gets for me.
I just remembered the blip. Have you guys heard about the blip?
Oh, you mean the bloop?
The bloop. Yeah.
Yeah.
The bloop. Fuck, I wish I thought of that. I would have looked some stuff up and added, but maybe we touch upon that in a future episode too, because that's pretty fucking crazy. That whole story. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but a lot of people claim it's the Cthulhu living under the ocean. I think that's fucking wicked rad.
Or I wonder what a volcanic eruption underwater sounds like. I wonder if it sounds like a bloop.
Yeah.
Bloop.
Could be. I mean, you think about all that water, it's all creating pressure and muffling whatever sound. It could totally make sense. So wait, I guess we'll restart. Let's just do a wave so we know what the cut point is. Cool. Sweet. So, great job.
Mike.
One triangle
great
left.
job, everyone. First of all,
Yeah.
great job, everyone. And yes, we've made it through. You know, you think when we were covering triangles, we'd only cover 3 of them, but guess what? There's 4 of us.
Yeah.
And there are way more triangles than 4, but Mike is going to talk about the 4th one. Mike, take it away.
And triangles are just arbitrary anyway, right? Like some guy in the 50s came up with it to explain the weird shit that happened in Bermuda.
Yeah.
And then everyone else was like, we need a triangle.
Exactly.
I want
Pretty
to feel like
much,
I'm
yeah.
part of something.
It's
So-
like Loch Ness Monster all over again. Everyone needs a
Exactly.
friggin' monster in their river,
Yep.
and everyone needs a triangle in their backyard.
Yep.
The only mystery triangle I want to get lost in is in the bedroom. All right.
A love triangle? All right. I'm listening.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So we had, and I think this might have even been the impetus for us doing this show. When we were talking about missing 411, there were a couple cases that came up that were in Michigan, and then that, led me to bring up the Michigan Triangle. And I, looking into this, again, like everything else, you think you kind of know, and then you start looking into something a little bit more, and there's all kinds of rabbit holes, like Mitch said. There's all kinds of wild shit that you didn't know and you weren't aware of that surround these topics. So besides, like I mentioned last episode, the guy that, one of my favorite missing 411 cases, the guy that goes missing just on the shores of Lake Michigan and then shows up in Massachusetts, Pittsfield, I wonder how close to that other triangle, right? Wow.
Not that close, I don't think. But, I mean, relatively close, I guess, like in terms of...
Pittsfield, I think, is like
Massachusetts.
central Mass, northern central Mass, right?
I could be wrong,
Yes,
too. I'd
it
have
is.
to look it up. If
Yeah,
that
it's
is where
not
he showed up.
southeastern Massachusetts. It's like... Yeah, it's
'Cause he
near the New
showed
York
up
line of
somewhere, but
Massachusetts. It's
his-
western.
Anyway, we can go back. We'll
Yeah,
look
sure.
that up. And then, in I think it was the 40s or way earlier than that, there was the little girl in Michigan who went missing for days and was like taken by a dog man, essentially. So again, there's the human element, like in Bridgewater. A lot of weird stuff that happens on the coast near that. I also liked in the Michigan Triangle, there's Minister National Forest right next to it. So with missing 401 on the brain, when I was looking at the map, I was like, oh, there's woods. So the points of the Michigan Triangle, in west, it's Manitowoc, Wisconsin. The east is Ludington, Michigan. And then south is Benton Harbor, Michigan. So those are the 3 arbitrary points. They were picked out to explain all the weird missing ships and phenomenon that happen in Lake Michigan proper, in the waters, that Great Lakes area. So I bullet pointed some interesting cases that I was able to find documentation of on some way, shape, or form. So most, if not all of these, have at least Wikipedia page with references. So starting in September 18th of 1679, Le Griffon, the largest sailing vessel on the Great Lakes up to that point. They were returning from their maiden voyage after they were trading some pelts and shit in Michigan. They're on their way back to Niagara, and they start getting towards what I guess is now the Green Bay area, and then bye-bye. They're gone. So all the stories that were trying to explain it, like everything possible back then, this is 1679, and people were like, yo, violent storm, angry fur traders, renegade Jesuit priests was one of the explanations, angry Native Americans, angry Native Canadians, and even self-sabotage. Like the captain and a couple dudes burn the ship to take all their stuff for themselves, keep all the fur, and then run away with the money. Yeah. Except to the thing, like, no trace of Le Griffon has been found to this day.
Wow.
To this day. So it was the largest sailing ship at the time. Ship disappeared, no reason. That was the earliest case in that area that I could find, 1679. So, 1883, there was a wooden tugboat out of Chicakawa, also known as
That's how they say it.
Chicago.
Yep.
Chicago.
Chicago. Yes.
Name of
Rolls off the tongue.
Mary McLean. So this wooden tugboat is out there. They witness mighty blocks of ice falling out of a clear sky into the lake. So think of like hail, but mighty. So they were describing like large enough chunks of ice that could penetrate the hull of your ship, especially
glaciers.
a wooden ship. I don't know if it was glacier level. I think other people would have noticed. But they saved one of them in the galley freeze box or whatever and brought it back. And was yo, look at the size of the ship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, like, odds are they didn't, you give these guys the benefit of the doubt. Odds are they didn't find ice, but, I mean, like, why not? And again, that speaks to the weird weather phenomenon. And this is back 1883, so this is before anyone had any real interest to push the Michigan Triangle angle. They were like, yo, we're out on the water. You would not believe the hailstorm that just came. The sky was clear, and all of a sudden these crazy giant balls of ice are falling, which could explain how a ship just gets taken out.
Yeah.
But again, 1891, May 21st, there's a ship called the Thomas Hume. It leaves Chicago after dropping off lumber, heading back to Muskegon and the Hackey Hume lumber mill. So it was one of those three-masted schooner deals, like the stereotypical pirate ship.
Yeah.
It's made the trip a bunch of times with its sister ship, the Ruse Simmons, not to be confused with Ross Simons.
Thank you for clearing that up.
The Thomas Hume and the Ruse Simmons are delivery ships for this lumber company. And they always make deliveries back and forth. This is like a normal thing. So the two ships are heading back from Chicago after they drop their delivery. And they encounter this storm, right? There's a weather event. So the Thomas Hume continues while the Ruse Simmons, we're not risking this, we're turning it around. Thomas Hume never arrives at the lumber mill, never makes it back. The lumber mill offers a reward, hefty sum, especially for back then. Nothing's ever found. No bodies, no wreckage. Ship's gone. So, November 22nd, 1912, 21 years later, the Ruse Simmons is still making deliveries on Lake Michigan. This time it's bringing Christmas trees from Thompson, Michigan to Chi-Town. Never arrives. Someone in the Kewanee Life-Saving Station in Wisconsin sees the ship because it's a relatively clear day. The ship has a SOS flag up. Like something's wrong, send help. And they're sailing by the life-saving station, which is the reason why this thing exists. So the station sends out a lifeboat. By the time the lifeboat gets to where the ship had been spotted, the ship's gone. No sign of it. Now the thing is, on records, that the visibility that day was like 5-6 miles. So it doesn't make any sense that by the time, with these clear skies, that this lifeboat gets out there, that there's no sign whatsoever at the ship. Like that's a ship sinking a three-sailed schooner sinking faster than anyone could expect, right? Even if it got hit by mighty pieces of hail.
Yeah.
So They not long after that same day, there's a severe snowstorm. But this is hours after the ship went missing. So it's not because of the snowstorm, but again, I got missing 401 on the brain. After a lot of those weird disappearances, there's a weather event after that makes it difficult to do the search.
Yeah.
So the next year, in 1913, Christmas trees start washing up, which is what that ship was, the Ruse Simmons was transporting.
Were they decorated or?
Full ornaments.
With the blood of the sailors.
And an angel on top. Blood of the sailors and an angel on top. Just like Christmas should be.
A year after that, some fisherman catches the captain's wallet. And I think it was the same town as the life-saving station. So this guy on the coast fishing pulls up the captain's wallet. So no other signs of wreckage, no nothing. Just the random Christmas trees and then the sailor's wallet, or the captain's wallet. In 2006, they find the Thomas Hume at the bottom of the lake with no signs of damage. And because you can go divers, we have modern technology, you can kind of look for this stuff.
Yeah.
The Ruse Simmons is found facing northwest towards the shoreline, not heading south the way that was reported. So they're even in a different position when they're found compared with what the story. So it's like all this weird shit of why. And again, there's speculation. Yeah. Maybe the weight of the trees fucked with the ship and the buoyancy or the rigging. But even then, that wouldn't explain how fast it disappeared. It just was out of sight. If the trees were fucking with it and it broke the hull or tipped over, there would have been masts still seen. Or if it tipped over, you would have had the keel. Like, none of this really makes any sense. And it just keeps going. Mm-hmm. So in 1919, the New York Times reports a huge meteor. Witnesses say balls of fire descended into the lake with an explosion so powerful it shook the earth. So
wow.
3 years later, 1921, a two-masted schooner transporting supplies to Benton Harbor, Michigan, which is the lower point of the Michigan Triangle, never shows up at its destination. So they do find the ship, and it's floating upside down, but there's no signs of the passengers, but there are signs of a collision, like it hit something or another boat hit it.
Okay.
But there were no accident reports and no other ships anywhere near the area. So the Coast Guard that found it determines no collision. No collision. And the 11 members of the crew are just written off into the depths of Davy Jones's locker. Is it Davy Jones's locker in a freshwater lake?
I don't think so.
I think it's his brother, Craig. Craig Jones.
Craig Jones.
Craig Jones's locker.
It's me, Craig Jones. He's Scottish for some reason.
He never gets invited to the family events.
Well, Davy Jones was Scottish, wasn't he?
Craig
No,
Jones's duffel
he's
bag.
Dutch. Never mind.
Craig Jones.
Yeah, he's just a Flying Dutchman, isn't he? Are they the same person?
Craig Jones's oven. But again, like local
Dutch
reports
oven?
for local consumption. No one really thinks twice about this shit until hindsight when they're looking at it again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The Coast Guard was just like, looks like somebody hit the boat, but nobody hit the boat.
Oh, well.
Then, done. Those guys are dead, gone forever, lost at not sea.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, 2020.
You say Nazi?
Yeah, I didn't
I
mean
think-
to. Not the ocean. Not the ocean is what I meant.
Not the sea.
1937, the O.M. McFarland is ending its voyage and it enters the Triangle. The captain is this dude, George Donner. He's just having a rough time. He didn't like his dinner that night. He didn't like the whole trip. He hates his job. Locks himself in the cabin, and he's like, fucking wake me up when we get there. So they almost make it to Port Washington, New York. They're getting closer. It's only a couple hours. They're going to be back. So, like, someone go wake up the captain. Captain isn't answering. They're like, what do you mean he's not answering? So everybody's going, knocking on the door. Captain. Door's locked from the inside. They can't get in there. They eventually break down the door. Captain's gone. No sign of him. Just homie disappeared. to what happened to the captain.
Yeah.
June 23rd, 1950. So we're getting more towards Bermuda Triangle time.
Yeah.
Northwest Airlines Flight 2501. 58 people on board the flight from New York to Seattle. Over the triangle, the captain sees a crazy electrical storm. Radios in. He's like, "This is your captain speaking. Well, not your captain. You know who I am. It's Flight 2501. There's a fucking crazy Pikachu storm up here." He wants to descend 2,500 feet to, like, avoid it. They're like, "Nah, bro. You got to stay where you are. Flight lanes, whatever the fuck." They denied him permission. All of a sudden, radio dead. Then he disappears from the radar. Plane's gone. Now, human remains end up washing up on shore, but there's been no trace of the plane to this day. There's an author, I guess, named Clive Cussler, and funny enough, they created, not them, but an entity was created known as the Michigan Shipwreck Research Associates. So that's how often crazy shit is going down in Lake Michigan in that area that they created this group. So this author and this group decide to join up and look for this plane, because this is like, it's a big deal if you can find this, because no one's found it. So from 2004 to like 2013, they do yearly almost searches for this plane. No trace. The MRSA is still doing stuff. I guess the author bowed out, but occasionally he'll still let his sonar guy go out or pay for the sonar guy to go help. MRS, the shipwreck people are still looking. Plane has not been found. Still. So, March 8th, 1994, hundreds of people witnessed UFOs, or UAVs, or UAPs. We're talking cops, meteorologists, Packers fans, mad people all see these UFOs. There's red and white moving lights near the south tip of the triangle.
What an eclectic
One lady
group.
described them as looking like full moons. What?
I said, what an eclectic group. You got meteorologists, cops, Packers fans. What a motley assortment.
Everyone around the water. They're all seeing this shit.
Yeah.
So there's got to be one of those three groups that you would trust.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
Definitely not Packers fans.
Meteorologists?
Definitely not cops.
Yeah.
Meteorologists.
Meteorologists get things wrong all the time.
Yeah, awful.
One lady described them looking like full moons, and that they were visible for at least a half hour. And they were said to appear as 3 echoes on the radar, sometimes 4 blips that weren't planes. 5 to 12,000 feet in height, or how would you say that? In
altitude?
Airspace?
Yeah.
In air?
Yeah, not elevation. But
No, there you go, yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
5 to 12,000 feet in elevation, moving all over the place, according to a convo that was printed in the Detroit Free Press, involving the National Weather Service. So this was all stuff that, like, I could find the actual printed documentation around the time of. And then what was wild to me, that just opens a whole other pathway to explore within this, and then goes back to, like, what if we drained the Bermuda Triangle? Would you start having that wild shit happen like it happened in Bridgewater, right? In 2007, I guess they were professors, but I'm calling them archaeologists because they were professors of archaeology. And wasn't Indiana Jones both an archaeologist and a professor of archaeology?
Yes. Yes, he was.
So Mark Hawley and Brian Abbott, they're on the lake looking for shipwrecks with sonar. And they claim, and you can Google photos of this, they find a ring of rocks like Stonehenge in the bottom of the lake. And they send out divers to photograph, and there's at least one picture. This one's a little weird, but going back to what John had mentioned about the rock in Bridgewater, in that area, this makes it extra interesting, is they take a picture of a rock which looks like a pictoglyph has been carved into it of a mastodon.
Oh, shit.
Which would place that carving potentially 12,000 years ago. So they were being secretive. I didn't dive that much further into it, but this was wild to find out. Not only did this thing exist, but that thing, the carving was found, which, you know, it's like a whole other bunch of questions, like who was there, how the hell did they know at that time what a mastodon looked like, all these other things. And I guess it's more open now, but when they found it and the thing that I read this in, they were being secretive, even the location of it. But I think maybe now, like since then, since 2007, 2008, more information has come out. You could see photos, aerial or above view of what the circle of stones looks like, as well as a photograph of what the stone that's carved is supposed to be. And super interesting stuff. Again, like, and now I want to know what point correlates with that on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
And that's just like the documented stuff that you could go Google right now. You can find things in our American history that back this stuff up. These events happened. There's wilder anecdotal stuff like the UFOs, the abductions, the missing people that all surround this area. But what is it about these triangles, bros?
Maybe it's just a cursed shape. Maybe a triangle is a cursed shape. And by calling it a triangle, we cursed ourselves.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. Is the triangle a cursed shape because of the triangle, or is the triangle a cursed shape because the shape is cursed and it just so happens to be a triangle?
I'm going to say it's because of the Illuminati using it as their symbol. They cursed it. They fucked it up for everybody.
Yeah, triangles are sacred shapes, as far as I know.
Aren't they the strongest shape, too, right?
That's what they
Is it
used to tell me in elementary school. I don't know if that's changed.
right.
Is a triangle just an arbitrary assignment for some weird shit that you want to point to?
It could be.
Could be. Yeah, very much. Well, that was fascinating. I feel like now
Yeah,
we
dude,
have
wild
more
shit.
questions than answers,
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
in this episode. I gotta say, I didn't know much about those other triangles. I mean, everybody really knows the most about, I feel like, the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
Is how close it is.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I mean, the Bridgewater Triangle is wicked close, and I feel like not a lot of people know about it.
Well, the Bermuda Triangle is like the famous one, though.
yeah.
Which is why I think a lot of people know about it. Because, like, I can think of tons of, times you're a kid watching cartoons, they reference the Bermuda Triangle. Or there's movies reference the Bermuda Triangle,
It's been in pop culture our entire lives.
Exactly. So that's why, like, we're all so... Even if we don't know everything about it, like, I think everybody, at least living in the U.S. at this point, above the age of... I'm going to say above the age of 5, has at least heard of the Bermuda Triangle once in their life. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who's never heard of it.
Yeah, big time. It's definitely true. Well, that's
And we still have no answers.
Yeah. No.
Right.
It's
Maybe we'll
insane.
get some in our lifetime, but I doubt it. I mean, we found some fascinating research on possible answers, but who knows? I mean, there's no real way
Yeah,
to
who
prove
built
a
the
lot of
stone
stuff.
circles? If there's stone circles at the bottom of the lake, how the fuck did they get there? And it's not like they fell into that formation. So that means at one point there were human beings able to live in that area, or at the very least get stones there and put them all together in a
It
shape.
could have been dry,
Well,
too.
you said
at some
that
point
they
in
had
time.
a mammoth on it, right?
Yeah, so that means there was ice.
So it
Yeah,
could
it's a
be
mastodon.
it could be
I don't know.
from the Ice Age, where, like, maybe because that could have been all glacier at that point. So maybe as the glacier melted, it filled in that whole area, and that's how that got there. That's like the logical explanation, right? But
Right.
then there's also have you guys ever heard, like, there's a couple of stories from, like, Alaska and Canada and even in, like, Siberia of woolly mammoth sightings of, like, woolly mammoths that are still alive and, like, people see them.
Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe those don't go back all the way to the Ice Age. Maybe those are more frequent. Maybe, like, the Algonquin or whatever native group it would have been, whether they're the Cree or whoever else, like, maybe those are only from like the 1500s, and they put them there somehow. Like, you don't know.
Sure.
It's interesting.
Yeah, we don't. Damn.
Yeah, a
That's so
lot
cool.
to talk about. A lot, like, more to talk about. I think it, like, you know, like was said, the more questions than answers. But I think that's going to be the good thing about this show. Just like sort of, you know, questioning things and learning about things that not everyone knows about and sharing that information. So,
And if
Hell
you're
yeah.
listening
This
to
is
this
a lot of fun.
episode and you know something that we didn't mention, please send us an email. Let us know. Like, maybe we can talk about it
Yeah,
on like,
definitely.
a future one-off episode or something like that.
Beastie Boys Paranormal at gmail.com.
There you go.
that's the one.
Especially
That is the
send
one.
in,
And hopefully,
send in stories if you've ever encountered an angry dragon god at sea, because I really
Yes.
want to know more stories like that.
Yeah. Any anecdotes that you've heard that we didn't even come across would also be very welcome.
or if you've ever eaten a handful of communion wafers and then passed a divine wind, let me know. I just hope someday I want to spend a night in the swamp with you guys.
I'm
And
into it,
have our
dude.
own
I want to
have our own pudge-wudgy experience.
I just want to smell all your methanes at once. I want to smell
We'll
all
see.
the methane you guys exert into the world.
If we hot box a tent, will we see swamp apes?
We don't need drugs.
I
We can
think
make
so.
our own. We can make our own hallucinations.
I mean, Mike, if you really want to see a swamp ape that bad, I'll dress up in a costume for you.
You heard it here, folks. That's a promise.
That is.
all right, guys. Well, that was fun.
Hmm.
Hell yeah. That's our episode on
Well-
triangles.
See you later.
Big gulps, huh? See you later. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.